Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. Dr. Ann DeSantis here with my wonderful co-host, Carlos Solorzano from Arizona. He's a
Hello.
Catholic author, speaker, and also an educator too, a theology teacher. Carlos, thanks again for joining me on this series.
Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure.
It really is. And I've been really enjoying all of the episodes. This is the Our Lady, Our Mother podcast series, and it's geared for families in crisis. So, what we've been doing is every month we've been focusing on a different area of crisis, whatever that would be. Some of the other topics that we've done were relationship crisis, and we talked about health crisis and loss of a loved one and marriage. And on this podcast, we're going to talk about the crisis of a person or a couple that's going to get separated. We will have a separate podcast for those who are divorced already, but we wanted to cover this topic because there's some people that are kind of in that interim stage. But before we really delve into this topic, as I always do, I thought maybe Carlos, just tell us again a little bit about you for any newcomers.
Oh, well, I'm a theology teacher at South Point Catholic High School, doing the Catholic speakers thing. And it's just amazing how the when you work in the world of teaching theology, you get dragged into different places. And I think the one that's most humorous to me is I'm a musician as well, and I perform part-time with different groups in town here. And one of the things I've never really mentioned to you, in at least on the podcast, that I've always found interesting is you meet a lot of people. And I think my favorite thing that happens is they ask you, do you do this full time? And I'm like, oh, no, I have a day job and I'm a teacher. So they always assume if you're a drummer that you become a drummer, that you teach PE or something like that. So, oh, no, no. And then I tell them I teach theology at a Catholic school, and they're like, really? And I'm like, mm-hmm. And then they'll suddenly have this deep brewing question. And do you have a minute? And we go on in 15 minutes. Yeah, I have a question. And it's usually a really good question. And it shows that, we're all looking for some deeper meaning with things, regardless of where we are. And if you think someone might be able to help you, I mean, I've been in that position too, where I meet someone, I'm like, I'd love to ask you this question. And we just could be at a donut shop for all you know, but you just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I mean, God speaks to us in all kinds of ways in all circumstances, doesn't he?
Hmm.
In everyday circumstances. So I always appreciate the stories that you share about your experiences as a teacher, as a speaker, as a musician. Forgot to mention that too. Carlos is also a musician. And the other thing I wanted to mention, which we've talked about on other podcasts, is that he's the author of a very special book called I Am His Mother, which is really a big inspiration, even for this very podcast that's focused on the Blessed Mother and her intercession in our everyday lives. And especially for those families who are going through some kind of deep trial, which some of you are listening are going through something. And so we really want to talk on this podcast not only about the crisis of separation in a Catholic marriage, but also how the Blessed Mother can intercede for you in all things. And so, Carlos, I didn't know if maybe you wanted to share a story. We all have a story, I think, something to do with either ourselves or family members or friends, people we know who have gone through this particular trial. I didn't know if you had something you wanted to share.
Sure. When I was at high school, I had this social justice class, and I grew up in the Los Angeles area, and my teacher had this interesting requirement in his class where you had to go to Skid Row, and he would do like different trips during the semester. And I sat there and thought, this is crazy. Why are we going to Skid Row? So, we visited like a homeless shelter and different, there was like a drug rehab center, but, in Skid Row, it was like basically just throw you in a room, you dry up, and it was not like those things you see on TV, those nice little rehab centers with well-pruned gardens. And the last stop we went to was actually a battered women's shelter, and I'll never forget it because they were talking about different people who've been there, like what is the common reason. And we actually had arrived, and I was a junior in high school at this time, and we actually had arrived at a time when a woman had just come with her child, and she had a towel on her head, and I guess her husband had hit her and busted her open, and she was getting out of that situation. And it was very sobering for us. I mean, here we were a bunch of teenagers. We were behaved, like we're talking and laughing on the way there. And then on the way back, it was really quiet because of all the things we saw. But it was very eye-opening because obviously she needed to get out of that situation. She needed to get away from, where she was living. And, obviously we don't know the extent of what happened later. We don't know if there was any reconciliation or, arrest or whatever. But obviously, I don't think anyone in their right mind would think that, well, she needs to stay at home, if they were married and just you guys figure it out and work it out. Like, no, she needs to get away from that. She's in danger. I mean, he had gotten physical with her. And so there are times that we need to step away, not, you know, leave permanently or, end it or something. Like you need a break. I mean, if I could share this real quick, I remember one time I was going on a Kairos retreat with the school I was working at, and I was going to be gone, 4 days. And my wife and I had got into an argument the night before. And I remember I was leaving because I had to pack my stuff. I was going to go to work that day, and then we were going to leave after school. And it was interesting because I was like, okay, well, I'm leaving. And she's like, yeah, uh-huh. And it was almost like we almost both wanted to laugh, but we were both still mad. I'm like, well, I'll see you in a few days. And she's like, yeah, yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay, well, you guys take care of the kids were small at the time. And a few days away, and I come home and miss each other. It's like, how are you? How are the kids? And it's good to see you, kind of thing. And so sometimes you need that space, and maybe it's something as simple as that, or maybe it's something as serious as having to get away because you were physically assaulted and you have to protect yourself and the child.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm glad you brought that up because there are those instances where safety is an issue. And I know that for myself as the executive director for the foundation, we get a lot of inquiries from people who want to talk to a priest, people who need prayer. And there are occasions that we do see couples, women sometimes, that will get separated because of, as you said, domestic abuse.
Hmm.
And, safety has to be number one when it comes to something like that. And so we don't really know the full stories of everyone, right? What goes on
Hmm.
behind closed doors. And so we always have to pray for people for what they're going through in their marriages. And that's part of why we exist, because when we came into existence, this nonprofit, the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, back in 2015, which, believe it or not, that was 10 years ago almost.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
true.
our anniversary of our 10 years is coming up August 31st of this very year, 2025. And we're taping this. Obviously, you're hearing this in the late fall, early winter of 2025, but we're taping these early. So I mentioned that it's coming up because we're taping it in the summer. But anyway, long story short, we came into existence to help couples that are facing separation or divorce. That was kind of what we used to refer to as our initial mission. Our initial mission, because we weren't really sure what our focus was going to be. But since that time, now that we've been around for a while, we did kind of widen that umbrella a little bit. So we have lots of different areas that we focus on, not just separation and divorce. It could be, as I've said during different podcasts, it could be something to do with a trauma or a marital relationship, something difficult in marriage, something to do with divorce or a job loss or loss of a loved one or being a caretaker or something else, because there's all kinds of crisis when it comes to families. But as far as separation is concerned, the way that we look at it as there's going to be a chance of reconciliation. And if there is in a separation, and I'm not talking about someone who's being severely domestically abused or
Mhm.
domestically abused in some way, talking about people who are having relationship problems that might be able to be resolved through marriage counseling. And by the way, we do have wonderful resources on our outside resource page at nonatus.org, including counseling, suggesting counselors. So it could go either way, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it could be someone who maybe there is a chance that something could work out and they could get back together. And a lot of times it doesn't go that way. And we're going to talk about that on the next episode because the next episode we're going to talk about people who are already divorced.
Mhm.
So we pray for you. I think that's one of the first steps for separation, isn't it, Carlos? I mean,
Mhm.
and there's no better person to pray to or ask for intercession than the Blessed Mother. And talk about that because I know you have such a devotion to her. I know we've both seen miracles in relationships that we know,
Mhm.
maybe direct family members. I know I'm going to share a little story in a little while from now on this podcast. But share anything you'd like to share.
It's interesting because when you look at the Annunciation, and obviously the Jewish betrothal is not the same as an engagement. There was already a different aspect to that relationship, which is why they said Joseph was going to divorce her quietly. So if you think about it, she pretty much was um, put in a position where she realized he was going to leave her. And um, imagine the emotional letdown, the high of encountering the angel Gabriel, and you're going to, bear the Son of God, the Messiah. And, knowing how Joseph was a righteous man, how she probably was excited to tell him what happened. And one of the things that was mentioned to me actually when I was in Philadelphia with Christopher West at a Theology of the Body course was there's a significance to the fact that Joseph sought to divorce her quietly. Now, keep in mind, he was going to divorce her. So there was a certain level of commitment that was already there, between them. That's not the same as an engagement that we have in the modern Western world. And he really didn't have to do that because if he thought there was a case of infidelity, his honor was at stake. So he already was protecting her. And I think that some cases there's something about us knowing a person. I think the best example would be a mom with a child because years ago, my sister, I don't remember what it was because my he's 34 now, but something had happened and she took him to the doctor and the doctor said he was fine. And she kept saying, no, something's not right. And she ended up going to two other doctors. And the third one was like, no, there's something wrong with him. And it was a matter of opinion, of course. And, the mother knows. So a lot of times I think we know what we need to do, or we know the person really well, like, the person's heart. Um, and I think that, in that case, sometimes you need that space, depending how bad it is. Like sometimes, a couple could be having a problem while one of them's going to go on a trip with some friends, and which is probably a good thing because then they have some space. But Mary's been through that. I mean, she went. I mean, she was probably crushed when Joseph was going to divorce her quietly, because they would use the word divorce if the betrothal was going to be broken. And I'm sure there was probably this sense of, God, how could you do this to me? I mean, I accept this gift of your son, and this wonderful righteous man would be the perfect, earthly father for him, and now he's rejecting me. And it shows that there can be an understanding. But I think the most important thing was Joseph. We know the dream. I mean, he trusted what he experienced, and he obviously communicated this to her. And that had to be one of the most amazing experiences for her, because knowing that God was not only with her, but with him. But I think the most important part of that was that they were both really honest with each other about what happened, what they were feeling. And, if you sometimes need space, okay. I mean, there's times when, it's good, it's healthy to be apart. And not necessarily has to be separation. I mean, like right now, my wife, as we're recording this, my wife's actually she's in rehearsals. She's a singer, and she's rehearsals to do they're doing Sister Act at one of the local theaters next month. We're recording this in July, and she comes home from work and she's here maybe an hour and a half, and she has to go to rehearsal. And lately, when she comes home from rehearsal, I'm already asleep. So I miss her. We're not like arguing anything about it, but it's like I miss her. But it's like that space is it's it's good. I mean, it's once she's done with all this and she can decompress from all that, it's like okay, then we'll go out to dinner. I'll probably take her do some nice things, and that absence is the heart grows fonder. But also if you need that space to just get away from the tension sometimes. And of course, if there's children involved, you don't want to have them in a position where they're being, caught in the middle. But I think it's important too, where it's how we deal with it too, because, if you're going to say, look, I think it might be a good idea if, mom stays at grandma's for a few days and, not make it this big war or battle, then people understand sometimes. I mean, sometimes like I live 3 miles from my in-laws, and there's times my kids will stay over at grandma's, and I'm sure there were probably times they did it because they were probably mad at one of us and didn't want to be here. Okay, well, that's fine. You can stay there. I know you'll be okay, and just you can have that space. And sometimes we need that. Plus, some people will use that time to really think about things, and so when they come back together and they start talking things out, they'll also focus on what they may have contributed to the tension that caused them to need that space for a while.
Such wisdom that you shared. I do agree with you that sometimes within marriages, we do need a little space in terms of maybe your own specific hobbies or things that you like to do, or, maybe it's even spending some time with maybe one of your children and your husband spending time or your wife with the other child, or, different things that you can do to kind of have your own thing that you enjoy doing. When you're living together 24/7, I do think you do need a little bit of space, don't you?
Yes.
I know for my husband and I, we're together all the time because he works from home and I do too as executive director for this nonprofit. I do have an office at home. So, we are together all the time. But I mean, on that subject of, separation, which is something a little different, obviously, than just
Hmm.
wanting a little space, it could be that maybe you need to get some really good marriage counseling. Obviously, we know that it has to be a two-way street, meaning your spouse has to be interested in doing it. And sometimes when you're having a trouble in your marriage, one of the spouses doesn't want to do that. And so our prayers go out to you for those who want to reconcile, want things to work out, want a better marriage, but maybe your spouse wants a divorce, wants to move forward with, not being together anymore. And so we do want to discuss that too, because obviously, as Catholics, we are as a nonprofit that's dedicated to families in crisis. We are always hoping and praying that marriages work out, that people stay together, that whatever it is, the issues that are causing you not to get along and not to have a good marriage can be resolved. But sometimes, unfortunately, and we've learned this too, unfortunately, it does happen that some people do wind up going through with a divorce. So we are going to share that on another podcast. I do want to share a little story, like I promised a few minutes ago, right?
Hmm.
Of somebody that I know very well. They're going to go nameless, but it's someone close to both my husband and I. And it happened when I was younger, when I was a teenager, that a couple that I know that did wind up getting separated, and after a matter of less than a year, they did wind up getting back together, and it was a big shock to everyone. Like, wow, they're getting back together. That's great. We're wonderful, and prayers are answered. So don't give up your prayers because it does happen sometimes that after a period of separation, maybe they realize, hey, we do belong together. We want to stay together. We want to work things out. We want this marriage to continue. We want to be closer to God and each other. And, as Catholics And actually, as people who love the Blessed Mother, like this podcast, right? Our Lady, Our Mother, we know that prayer can do a lot. And prayer can help to mend things that we didn't think would ever be mended. And
Hmm.
so send us your prayer intentions, especially if they have to do with your own separation or divorce or someone that you know and love. All you need to do is just go to our website at nonatus.org and just the drop down there that's for prayer. We take those very seriously. Not only will I be praying, but also our Mercedarian friars, the priests and the brothers who are with us, who pray for you and your families every day. So you just never know, right? I mean, things can be repaired, but it does take work, doesn't it? Just like
It
any
d-
marriage takes work. So didn't know if you
it
had anything
does.
to share with that.
Yeah. I I teach high school, and a lot of times I've had upper grades, and we'll talk about marriage. And I mention a lot. I go, we look at these shows, the Say Yes to the Dress or whatever, these bridal shows, marriage shows, and they're nice. I go, but you realize that's not marriage. That's not how it is. I mean, like I always laugh when you hear a married couple say, "Well, you're not the person I married." And in my case, I'd be like, "Well, of course not. I was 25 when we got married. I'm 53 now. I'm not the same person." Um, there's always going to be changes. And it's like you have to look at it and accept the fact that you're going to have those huge problems. And, it's interesting because like someone will run a business or they'll go into some occupation where they know there's a lot of struggle and they accept it. But then people sit here and think that the marriage won't be the same or not even harder. And it's interesting because in my own marriage, I think the best thing was that my parents and my wife's parents, they were people who, they raised you like when you say something, you have to mean it. And in today's, especially our culture, there's a lot of people where not even just marriages, but just they don't keep their word. I mean, there are cultures out there still where, you'd rather die than break your word. And we don't think about the preparation part. Like there has to be, you need time to get to know the person and to really they have to see your imperfections because you both have imperfections, and then there's change. I mean, like now, I remember when I had to start dealing with my wife with menopause, and it was like, wow, this is different. And the older I get, the way I've changed, and it's just there's that sense of, okay, you work it out, you figure it out. But that's what's important, to be able to sit down and communicate, what's bothering you. I mean, when I hit 50, I was approaching 50, I was struggling and just kind of looking back and thinking, have I really accomplished anything in my life? And I was telling my wife about it, and she kind of smirked and almost rolled her eyes about it, but she's like, well, you're not really paying attention, are you? Because and she's like naming this and that. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, but see, I'm glad I told her because I I just was doubting myself. I was struggling, and part of it was wondering if was I coming off as a decent husband and father, or whatever. So I wasn't afraid to go to her with that. And same thing, she's gone to me with things, and I mean, my wife's a principal, and I can't tell you how many times we've sat down and she's questioned her effectiveness as a leader. I don't know if I'm good at this or whatever. And, I'm in education. So, I say, well, sounds like to me, you're a good principal. And then plus people in our diocese will speak highly of her. But it's important to just be able to go to your spouse and convey those things that you're struggling with, because you're going to change. They're going to change. And you just have to, really, especially when you're struggling with it, you have to be able to share that. But then also, what I think happens a lot is that the other person doesn't always really want to hear to deal with it. And so you maybe don't want to approach the person because you're afraid of the response. So you have to be able to, be the cheerleader for that person as well. And especially remind them of the good things about them, especially when they're struggling with something.
Yes. Again, lots of wisdom there. I love what you said about how we all change. I mean, I think if we look at ourselves over our lifetime, because we're constantly learning, and when
Hmm.
we're constantly learning, and we might even maybe get new hobbies or new habits, different things, I mean,
Hmm.
I myself, my husband and I are going to be celebrating 36 years of marriage coming up.
Congrats.
Yeah, now as I said, we're taping this in the summer, so by the time you hear this, we'll already have our 36th anniversary. But I mean, we've learned so much over the years, and it's true that we're not exactly the same people. When you've known somebody that many years, whether it is your spouse or whether it's somebody else, I mean, um, we know that we change, right? When we look at our
Hmm.
parents, our brothers and sisters, our friends, I mean, people do change sometimes. I mean, maybe the basic roots of their personality might be a little bit the same, but hopefully, if we're growing in faith and in virtue, we are different people than we used to be, right? Um,
Yes.
so I just think knowing that it really helps us to understand just human nature in general. And what you said about commitment too, I mean, what we have as a Catholic marriage is a sacrament. I mean, that
Hmm.
is really, I mean, a wonderful and beautiful and a high level thing. And it is a covenant. And we have to keep that in mind that Christ is there in the marriage. And so it's a serious thing when someone gets separated or divorced, a very serious thing. And we need to take it that way. At the same time, people who are listening to this podcast, and maybe you have had a very, very terrible marriage. Maybe your spouse has been abusive, or maybe they're addictive, personality or narcissism or something that has made it just almost impossible. And so we want to empathize with you, and we pray for you, and we hope for and pray for the best in your life, no matter what direction it goes in, because we want to communicate also that the church cares, and we are there for you no matter what direction things go in. And that's why we help people who are in marriages, healthy marriages. We help people who are seeking help. We help people who are separated, and also people who are divorced and annulled as well. So I don't know, Carlos. I just think this is a wonderful topic that we have today. And it's such a blessing and such a beautiful thing to know that the Blessed Mother is praying for us, isn't it?
Hmm. Well, I mean, she certainly went through that experience of separation. I mean, he was going to divorce her quietly. I mean, he obviously, the scripture doesn't give us the specifics as far as what was said, but he didn't accept what she said about her conception. So, there was that relatable thing she can go through. I mean, even if a couple discusses that, there's still that feeling of, okay, this is happening. Um, I think the biggest mistake we make is we look at the wedding and like this party and like everything's going to be like this. It's like that's not how it is. This is just we're coming together and starting a family here, but it's like you have to understand the struggles, and that's what I appreciate about the Catholic marriage process was that the meetings and our the priest who married us, he was very serious about it, and he was explaining the whole covenantal thing, and there's going to be things that you're going to go through that are difficult, and you have to figure it out. And I think personally, because there's so much divorce in the world today, and like people just so quickly, and I think sometimes people realize that they gave up too soon. And it's interesting to me because there's all these inspiring stories of athletes and actors and different business owners, whatever, who've done all these things, which is wonderful, and you hear their stories of perseverance. But then when it came to their personal lives, certain relationships, they just gave up real quickly. It's like, well, that has to give you have to put in the most work into that. And I think that's what we don't talk about enough with that, because even with like kids, you have parents who are divorced, and one of them's paying child support, and they think maybe writing a check is being a parent. It's like, no, you have to be a parent. So it's like there's I don't think we're really people are sitting us down and explaining things like this is what you're going to deal with. I mean, even as a teacher, when I talk to young teachers, and I'm like, no, you're good, you got this. This is part of the process, and I've gone through this too, and this is what I did, and you should talk to other teachers as well, how they handled that adversity. But I mean, we can't sit here and think everything we go through in our life is going to be smooth sailing. And the funny thing is always when people will say things like, "Well, you're not the person I married." I'm like, none of us are, because we change. They change. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. Again, such wisdom. That is a very true statement. And I think it gives also some help to those who are listening that are separated to help to understand yourself and your spouse and
Hmm.
what you're going through. I do want to mention one resource that we do have on our website. Under our helpful resources drop down, we have a for your marriage page, which we have some videos there that we did in the past and a couple podcasts on marriage. And it gives some tips for people who are maybe going through some rough spots. So check it out. And tune in next month because next month, as I said, the topic will be divorce. And we will talk more about if it does go in this direction of your marriage ending and maybe a divorce and an annulment. So, Carlos, do you have any final words before we end?
Um, yes. I just was like, because when I teach my teenagers, I tell them, I said, you can't look at this as dating, marriage. Like you have to really think about who is the person that you are willing to go through every possible adult struggle. And it's even if you have a good marriage and you you might have a child that is sick and maybe sadly dies. Who do you want next to you when you get the call that your father's died? Or it's like that's what you have to think about. Plus, during the courting phase, everyone's like, oh, I want to fall in love, and like be with someone and give it, don't be in a hurry, and give it time. Go through struggles and start to see if when you're working things out, are you really working things out, or is someone manipulating? I mean, I think I've actually met adults even when I was in my early 20s that, and I really respected them, that were like, I'm not in a relationship right now because I have a lot of problems and I need to work on myself. And I thought, man, that's amazing. Because sometimes someone's trying to tell us that, look, that we're having a problem because of how we're doing something. I mean, my wife has certainly sat me down, explained things that I do that, are certainly wrong. Don't do that, or, this makes it difficult. And I don't want to hear it sometimes, but, who better to tell me than the person I'm living with? So, and vice versa, so and it's interesting because what I've learned, and I really want to share this, is when we first had kids and, they were little and you're taking care of them, I noticed little petty disagreements we'd have. We just kind of blew it off because taking care of the kids, like, oh, yeah. So at first I thought, oh yeah, this is great because we just blow it off like it's not that important, not realizing that there were certain things that we were not addressing while we were supposedly blowing it off or getting along better, and that didn't help. And then later, what I learned is sometimes the whole idea of compromise, whatever, is very important, but sometimes I learned that it's just a matter of sitting down and, okay, this is what I have to tell you. And I can see that she heard me and it mattered. And then same thing. She tells me, I listened, it mattered. We really didn't, I don't know if I want to say didn't resolve it or didn't, I don't know how to explain it, but there was a great importance knowing, oh, I heard you, you heard me. And that in some cases, that's all you wanted. And And then I remember when that would happen, I'd wake up the next day and, it wasn't that, I'm sorry. It was just, I woke up the next day and thinking about what I said and what she said. I'm like, I'm good. And then, she'd get up and we'd have breakfast and we're fine. So sometimes it's just knowing that they heard you and understand you, respect you, and not having these, because today we have a very materialistic world where there's all these expectations, and it's like, it doesn't have to be all that. Just it's a matter of someone being on a journey in life with you, and that's all you want, is that they're there with you.
Hmm. Wow, so well said. Thank you for sharing
Thank
your
you.
experiences, your relationship, your heart. I mean, and I couldn't agree more. I do think that over many years of being together when you're married, you learn over and over again that we're all evolving, aren't we? I mean, we are all evolving, and hopefully we're evolving with the Lord, right, in our faith. And I think that's the beauty of a Catholic marriage that's very connected, is that you see them growing in virtue and you as well. And so thank you so much for your wisdom and for the time on this podcast. This has been a great series so far. And just a reminder to pray to Our Lady. I mean, if you are in a circumstance of you're separated right now, somebody that you know or care about, I mean, there is such a thing as miracles in life, and maybe that miracle could just be that you got through this time, and maybe things will progress into what you don't want it to, a divorce. I mean, and we hope not either. But just pray to the Blessed Mother. Pray to her for her love, for her guidance, and also just for your life in general and for your relationship. And we will too. So we're thankful for you. Be sure to learn more about us by visiting our website at nonnatus.org. Again, this podcast is the very first Tuesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Philly Nonnatus YouTube channel. Thank you all again, and we will see you next month here with the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for freedom, family, and faith. God bless.